Lamping here, PHRA's Executive Director. Welcome to P4, People, Purpose, Passion, Pittsburgh. P4 is brought to you by our members and sponsors, Latitude and the University of Pittsburgh Executive MBA Programs and Center for Executive Education. We appreciate their support, and we will hear from them throughout the podcast, beginning with the University of Pittsburgh Executive MBA Programs and Center for Executive Education. In this episode, Rachelle will discuss bringing the 5 Ps approach, perspective, problem solving, partnering, purpose, and people to everything she does.
Welcome to this episode of P4 with Rachelle Nickols, the silo slang people person hailing from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Rachelle, excited to dig into your background and hear your story when it comes to people in the HR space. So the way we get these things started is telling us, where'd you come from and how'd you get to where you are today?
Thanks, Pete. Happy to be here and happy to network with everyone virtually. So for me, I'm a Pittsburgh native, and HR has been where I've spent the bulk of my career. Right now, I'm currently working at Thermo Fisher Scientific as a senior HR director, and primarily working with different business leaders across different segments to help them really think about their strategy, navigating employee relations issues, some coaching and consulting that happen along the way. But ultimately really enjoying the opportunity to deal with our greatest asset, people, and the many challenges, but also joys that come with that along the way.
Nice. And in school, did you study HR?
So interestingly, I think it started as accounting and then maybe a little psychology, but found myself falling into the HR space. Really ended up with a cool professor who kind of brought to life the dynamics that happen if you manage people resources well versus when you don't. So probably by my junior year, I started taking more of a concentration in HR, but my background and the business degree itself is my undergrad. And that's really where it started, but have been in HR ever since.
And any certifications or classes along the way for continuing education, other degrees and things that have helped you out?
Yeah, I did the Lean Six Sigma, so really thinking about process improvements, and also from a pro side change management perspective, just did that actually within the last 18 months or so. So really thinking about how we move people through change and trying to balance that as effectively as possible.
The Lean Six Sigma piece is interesting. At Lockheed Martin, they taught us, green belt, black belt. And I was like, what? There's a name for the structured way of thinking? So cool. And it's interesting to hear your take on this one. Shout out to Beth Davis and one of the programs that she's taught over time of Agile HR. And so I don't know if you've heard of that or not. This is not me doing a sales pitch for them. That class changed my life. So it's worth taking a look at it. And it brings in those lean, agile, scrum concepts to this HR principles. Back to you, Rachelle. So our paid programming. So Rachelle, you're in HR. You talked about, working with all those different functions, slaying those silos. And I want to hear where that saying came from in your eyes, because I love it. Why is HR the excitement of your life and where you decided to take your professional career? And quick shout out that you mentioned Thermo Fisher, but let's not forget about your work at UPMC, at Bayer, and some of the other, organizations that you've been with. So big players in this space. So by no means is this like your first rodeo in the people space.
Thank you for that. Yeah, a little closer, more than 15 years, we'll say. We won't do exact math on tenure, but yeah, definitely spent some time in the space. And as I think about the silo slaying component that you asked, it just really gets to recognizing that we get farther together than we do not. So we can get very hung up at times on my role, my lane, my leader, my goals. But if we don't really take the time to understand how they intersect and connect and how we can help each other, we'll likely end up tripping over each other or creating some duplication of effort. So I've really, a coach that I had years ago when I was at Bayer had done some research and 360s and reviewing. And the theme that kept coming up is that I go out of my way to really try and build those bridges and really try to understand where people are coming from. And really with an intent to be efficient. It takes a little more time up front, but helps on the back end to really build those bridges early on and build those connections and leverage each other. Because I truly do believe I don't have all the answers, despite how long I've been in this field. So truly benefit from learning from others.
Sounds like you're adopting a mindset of continuous improvement. We've seen that in some of the other
Wonder where that
classes.
came up.
Yeah, very, very cool. But you're actually putting it to use, right? And I think it's a quote by Helen Keller, right? Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. That's what comes to mind as you're sharing that piece right there. Okay, question for you. So think about anybody that's in this, HR, people, employee space. What do you think is top of mind, right? Hottest trend in this realm right now today?
So I think there's two that we're
I'll
continuing to.
Fine.
I'm struggling because one is this whole return to office and getting people back to work component, right? I think depending on the industry you're in, it's still a very real, ever-present conversation that we're trying to figure out how to balance folks being remote, being on site, and getting them back to something of whatever our new normal will be. The other one is trying to think of what the other one was, but maybe that is my top one. We'll stick with that one for now.
Okay, so yeah, well, let's dig into a little bit more. What has your experience been, right? You have tons of employees all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And I'm betting that not everybody was able to WFX, work from anywhere, throughout the entirety of the pandemic, right? There was probably some folks that had to come in and operate machines throughout the hot and heavy, days, weeks, months. And how did you get involved and how'd you navigate that? It's not something that they teach you in HR school, right?
Certainly wasn't. And I think even just given the construct of our organization, there was definitely a lot of pride in bringing people together on the sites and campuses, even if you weren't in the operations manufacturing side of things. So, when the pandemic happened, it truly was a game changer to really figure out how teams collaborate in a different way. Technology's been around for a while, but clearly we weren't leveraging it to the same magnitude as recent years. But you're right, there were some functions like operations and manufacturing that truly still had to come to work. In some cases, some of our sales or commercial folks to some degree, but by and large, most of our colleagues, especially at Thermo Fisher, ended up remote for an extended period of time, more than 12 to 18 months in many cases. And I'd say that the benefit that happened at the time was everybody had the same experience globally at the same time. So we were almost all forced to rip the Band-Aid off. As you can see, I'm working from home, but that whole rawness of what happens and, the interruptions are, kind of normalized us all at the same time. So in some ways that helped. I think the challenge now though, is we're in this hybrid transitional phase where there is a lot of value in what happens when you're on site or on campus or in the office, because you have these ad hoc water cooler conversations that now don't require a scheduled meeting to occur. But now not everybody's in the same days, or maybe just trying to balance my flexible schedule and balancing the commute to and from work and all of those things. So it's a little bit of a challenge. And I think the opportunity we all have is, what did we learn from when we were leveraging technology the way that we were? And how do we benefit and maybe capitalize on those learnings to make sure the experience isn't lost just because now we have people in the room and people remotely. It's interesting that we listened better when everyone was remote, but somehow when some are in the room and some are remote, we forgot how to listen again. So it's just kind of reflecting and putting some of those lessons learned back into practice.
It's interesting that you say that, because we'll talk to organizations of all sizes here, right? Local, national, global, small, medium, large, enterprise, and nobody's cracked the code. And if you look at some of the, things that SHRM is publishing, hey, we all want to do this stuff, but how do we actually accomplish it? But whenever you're talking like learning and development and hybrid and connections, conversations, really, really people first mindset. That stuff gets me fired up. We'll have to chat more about that later. Keep going. So let's go into the hybrid world. Okay, you're not going to stop working there, and you're probably having some like stay interviews, probably doing performance reviews, probably doing some feedback sessions. You mentioned coaching and counseling that you did before. What did the feedback conversations look like, and was it easier if it was hybrid versus in person, and did you change the process?
So I'd say it depends on the person, but where possible, having cameras on helps, right? So anytime you can build that connection with somebody, and it's not just this voice that you hear, that people can see your expression, that they can hear that you're truly listening and there for them, I think it helps. I think it's part of the benefit of when you're in person, right? You have that face-to-face reading, ability to read body language, those types of things. So it's how do you continue to build those connections in place, even if you are virtual or hybrid and not in the same location. The reality is we did this in some ways, right? Like some of us have supported sales workforce, right? So I don't have the ability to fly to every person to have every conversation in face-to-face. So it's, again, just being more intentional, I think, at times when you're going through certain conversations and trying to remember to build those connections where you can.
So you obviously know this stuff pretty well. And I'm curious, you mentioned some of the people that helped you get to where you are now. Let's dig into your specific professional development and those, tidbits. And I almost call them like springboards or superchargers along the way when it comes to like professional advice and guidance. So two-part question. One,
Sure.
a tip that you've received. Two, tip that you've given, right? And if it's the same one that you recycled over time, we're not mad about that either. But share that piece with us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that I've been given that I'd say sticks out to me the most, I remember a leader that I had when I was at Bayer, and the conversation was, continuous. Just always thinking about these big picture ideas. There's a lot of things going on, wanting to try and fix it, right? And we want to do good. We want to impress our leaders. We want to help our employees. And the advice at the time, and I quote, was, "Don't boil the ocean." And it was like a hard thing to kind of hear and process. Like, what do you mean? I'm not boiling the ocean. I'm like, this is what needs to be done, and this is when it needs to be done. And it felt very logical to me at the time. But what that leader was really trying to say, and to kind of make it a visual, was when you think about steps, at the end of the day, you want to get to the top of the steps, but you can't jump from step 1 to step 20 all in the same day. So how do we really start breaking things down into bite-sized pieces and recognizing what's palatable for where you are? Everything can't be done all at the same time and done well. And you can't bring everyone along at the same pace if you're jumping from step 1 to 20. So not boiling the ocean is really starting to break that down into bite-sized pieces and really thinking about what's most practical for now versus where you're trying to go and how do you build that in over time. That's probably the one that truly sticks out to me the most, that I've honestly repeated back to other people as I've mentored them over the years. Like, this sounds like one of those pieces, don't boil the ocean moments, for sure.
I love that one. And I think it's something that all of us can be reminded of time and time again, because it's easy to get so caught up in our day-to-day. Oh my gosh, I got to solve all this. Hey, one, we have everybody here together. I am not alone. So get rid of that alone together sensation. I think you're doing a good job of, walking the walk, talking the talk towards that, but also saying, hey, this is our true north. This is where we're trying to go, and letting everybody around you come up with some of those solutions. We may not even know that, hey, from point A to B to C to D. And some of those solutions, we might not even need point B. We can go straight to C, right? But we're not going to go the whole way to the end of the alphabet there. You mentioned the mentorship piece right there, right? And so learning from others, helping others. What we've heard on these other podcasts is that trust and respect are really, really important foundation for any of these relationships, especially in HR. Whenever you have to have those tough conversations, man, isn't it easier to have those conversations after you have that foundation of trust and respect?
Yeah.
And you're not, I did a presentation at BC3 yesterday and shared a story about whenever HR used to walk into the room of the company I was working at, people would scurry. It's like, get out of here, HR. Like, it's almost like guns blazing or something. The bad guy came into town. So back to this. There's a lot of asides and rabbit holes here. So for you, Rachelle, how you building trust and respect and those foundational building blocks?
I'd say that the word that comes to mind is vulnerability. So I tend to build trust through telling different stories and showing the journey that I'm on. And I have a mentee that I'm working with now, and oftentimes in the conversations, I end up adding something like, okay, I'm just gonna be real with you. I'm still working on this myself. Like I can tell you the practical foundation steps, but here's how this plays out for me. And here's what I'm working on. And really just being humble and vulnerable enough to be able to share the lumps along the way, the learnings, or even just where you're still actively working on something. Because it demystifies or at least creates a sense of I'm just not here to fix something for someone else, but that I'm also an open book and opportunity to learn as well, which I truly believe, again, I said it earlier, we can all continue to learn from each other for sure.
The continuous improvement piece comes back again, and it also sounds like there are hints of authenticity in there with your response of vulnerability and humility. Okay. Any other tips that you'd have for the PHRA family before we get into the kind of fast fire part 3 of the podcast?
Yeah, I think the other one I would add is there's always an opportunity to and it may come up in one of our later topics, but just to give yourself a little bit of grace, because we can learn from other people and we don't have to be so hard on ourselves at times, right? So when I think about, we do want to do our best. We want to show up well and minimize the mistakes that we might make along the way, but don't be afraid of the mistakes. They truly help edify us over time. And they're not all bad. They really can help us grow and improve, but also to be a learning lesson for someone else to maybe help them later on in life or as they're navigating their career. So don't be afraid of mistakes. They're not all bad.
They're not, mistakes are not all created equal, right?
No.
It's that's one that's easier said than done. Man, I wish there's a way to just like sprinkle on some self, I don't even know what that would be, but something that we can say, hey, it's okay, right? And be able to move forward, right? Put it on a box, maybe a little bit of positive compartmentalizing. Thanks for sharing that, Rachelle. Let's go into the third part here. So we start off with a book, right? Is there a book that
Yes.
you're currently reading and or something that you recommend to people, like, gotta read this one, get it on your list?
Yeah, so there is one, and I have it nearby. It's actually called Humankind from
Okay.
Ashley Eland. And I just think about the environment we're in around the world. It's not just in the work environment, but taking time to recognize the value that we bring to each other, and really recognizing that we all aspire to be good people and kind. But how do we really start to identify and leverage the good in others along the way? So just kind of a worthwhile when you're taking a step back and looking to reflect, but it's a good read.
Humankind. Okay, we'll have to put it on the list. I'm an Audible fan myself. Okay, next one. We're looking back into our past. And we're saying, hey, younger Rachelle, you pick up the phone and your younger self says, hey, who is this? You'd be like, this is the person that wants to tell you a little bit of advice that I wish that I would have known a little bit earlier. Maybe I wish somebody would have said, hey, you heard it, but actually do this. Rachelle, what's the advice that you'd give the younger Rachelle?
Yeah, it kind of piggybacks off the comment I said a little bit ago about giving yourself grace, but laugh a little more. I tend to be very serious. From a Myers-Briggs, for those that know Myers-Briggs, I'm an ISTJ, so very intense and passionate about all things that I do and trying to do them well. And at the end of the day, it's just taking that step back to realize that it doesn't always have to be tense and so serious. And again, it just makes it easier to connect with people when you do laugh a little more. So probably laugh a little more.
Yeah, and that shows a little bit of the vulnerability piece in there too, right? Letting down some of those guards and those barriers, right? We're all people at the end of the day. Okay, the last one, which is a new question for season 2 and has all the listeners on the edge of their seats. There's probably between 4 and 650,000 people listening up to this point right now. at any given time. What is your favorite desk toy that goes with you wherever you go?
So I have one. It's a Koosh, my little stress toy, but it's also very colorful and a nice distraction to look at every once in a while when you just need something else to refocus. But that's the one that I have at the moment. Something
Does it ever
silly.
find does it ever find itself accelerating across the room, traveling through the air at certain points in the day?
Not accelerating, but I will say my dog is confused as to when he thinks it's mine versus his.
So okay, there's more sharing with all the members of the team at home and at the office.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. A couple of notes here. That the silo slaying is real, and you slicing through solutions to avoid boiling the ocean is something that we can all take with us, and reminding ourselves that together we can really get a lot of things done, and building those bridges to drive efficiency is helpful at all stages of the organization. Always bringing the vulnerability, humility, and authenticity to us in every conversation that we go into, just being real, whether it's hybrid, in person, remote, right? All of them, and saying to ourselves that those mistakes are okay, and that it's all right to not have everything figured out at the beginning, and to not be perfect all the time. So, Rachelle, thanks so much for your time today. Look forward to seeing you at an event soon, and we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Pete.
People do matter. And at the end of the day, we cannot get any work done if we don't have the right people in place. Are your people connected? Latitude is the one-stop shop people connection software platform. Our software workshops and programming facilitate new employee onboarding, manager one-on-ones, stay interviews, mentorship programs, and peer networking to increase retention, engagement, satisfaction, productivity, profitability, and happiness. Imagine a technology that intersects your calendar with LinkedIn, Zoom, Google Docs, and your CRM. Contact Latitude today to schedule a conversation.
The PHRA P4 podcast was created to help build HR leaders through discussions with thought and business leaders on the most critical success factor of any business, its people. If you enjoy an episode, please help us spread the word by subscribing to the podcast and providing us a rating. We would love for you to take a screenshot of the episode, tag PHRA, and share it with your followers. Until next time, thank you